Please remember this session is recorded and the recording will be made available via our YouTube channel. Also, every participant will receive a certificate of attendance. Please submit any questions you have in the chat box and we will answer these at the end of the session. Without further delay, I'm excited to hand over to Jo, who's going to tell us about using courseware to prepare effectively for 4 skills tests. Sorry, Jo, over to you.
It's a long title. Thanks, Charlie. Hi, everybody. Good morning, good evening, wherever you're from. I can see lots of people from all over the place joining today, so that's really fantastic. Turkey, Serbia, Georgia, Ukraine, Poland, India. Wow, fantastic. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming today. I hope this is a really interesting and productive session for you. So I'm going to get started. I just want to go over some housekeeping first before we get started. So this webinar is recorded. 2 weeks after the webinar, you'll be getting a link to the recording. So if you don't catch all the information today, that's okay. You'll get it later and you can go back and look over any bits and pieces you want to reread. You'll get a personalised certificate with your name on it and you'll get a goodie bag as well. So that's a little bit before we get started. What are we going to look at today? We're going to be talking about 4 skills tests. And when we say tests, we mean big assessments, big tests. And what do students need to be able to do them? We're going to look at some of the challenges that students face. We'll look at adding online or remote learning to the mix. What does that do? What happens when we do that? We'll look at supporting students and choosing the right courseware. We'll look at flipping our approach to teaching test prep and thinking a little differently, a little bit out of the box about how we do things. Maybe to how we've done things before. We'll look at PTE General, which is an assessment that we're going to use today and a courseware that goes with it to give some examples of what we're talking about. We'll look at online and offline skills focus, and then we'll have some time at the end for questions and answers. So if you do have any questions that pop up while we're going through, do pop them in the chat box and we'll get to them at the end of the session. Okay, so just before we get started, my name's Jo. I'm a product manager at Test Prep at Pearson for Test Prep. I manage most of the Pearson test courseware, so that's PTE General and PTE Academic, although I do work on Cambridge and IELTS and lots of other things as well. I'm a teacher, like most of you, and I've been a teacher trainer, so teaching is really at the heart of everything that we make here, and I have a lot of experience with teachers and working with teachers and really interested in hearing your comments and what you have to say today as well. So before we go any further, I'd like to hear just a little bit about you. So where do you teach? I don't need to know the name of the place, but what kind of place is it? Is it a private language institution, a state school? Do you work for yourself as a teacher? And how do you teach? In the classroom, face-to-face, online? If you could put those 2 things into one line in the chat box, we can hear a little bit about you. Okay, public, state school, online, private language, state school, public school. Okay, so there's quite a mix there. Quite a mix, a little bit of everything. So you can see just from this webinar today, there's a lot of different scenarios out there for how people are teaching nowadays, especially with everything that's going on in the world, right? So this is a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. So 4 skills tests. What do students need to prepare effectively? When we're talking about 4 skills tests right now, I'm talking about major high stakes tests, tests where students are taking them to achieve a big goal. So to study abroad, to study at university, to study for work, to achieve some kind of life goal with their test in English. What do students need to be able to prepare? So if we think about pretty much any of those tests, and I'm talking about, could be Pearson tests, it could be Cambridge tests, it could be Trinity tests, it could be TOEFL, it could be any of those tests at all that test the 4 skills. What are the basic requirements that students have to be able to achieve or be able to do in order to do well in those tests? So obviously the basic thing, communicate across the 4 skills, right? They need to have, for the level they want to achieve, a decent level of English and be able to use it in the right way. They need to be able to show receptive, productive skills and effective use of them as well. It's not enough just to speak in English. You need to be able to use it in the right way to achieve the goal of the activity in the test. They need to show some language knowledge, so they need to show vocabulary, grammar, all appropriate to what they're doing. They need language strategies as well to be able to focus on any content that comes up in the test. And they need to be able to use the 4 skills in combination, right? So it's not speaking or listening or reading or writing in isolation. They're always interlinked, as we know, so they have to be able to do that in the test. They have to be able to use the skills in real life simulations quite often in these assessments. So in tasks or situations where they would have to use English in real life, these are the things that are presented within these tests. They have to be familiar with the test itself. So they have to know about the task types, the way that the test is formatted, the layout, what to expect when they do the test on test day. And of course, have enough practice with all of that in order to build confidence for the test. So pretty basic stuff. Yes, you will be getting the presentation at the end, so don't worry, I know I'm going quite fast. So quite a lot of stuff that students need to do is that everything. Is familiarity with the test enough to do well in a 4 skills assessment? Very quickly, I want you to answer this question in the chat box. I'll give you about a minute to think about this. What are some challenges students face in preparing for 4 skills tests? What kind of challenges do they face? If you can just type your answers into the chat box, and we'll have a look at what you come up with. Nerves, absolutely. Absolutely. It's not the same practicing in the classroom as it is doing the test itself, right? Stress. Time management. Limited testing strategies. Yes, exactly. They need to have a lot of things to rely on under stress, right? Fear, enough time to do it, lack of vocabulary, anxiety. What to do first? That's interesting. Yeah, what do you do first in the test? How do you prioritize your time? Not knowing what they must know. Lack of concentration. Yeah, lack of experience. Great. So there's a lot of things that you're mentioning there that are additional things apart from their English and their English abilities that they need to be able to do, right? So, sorry, I'm just going to the next slide. So, as we're saying, it's much more than just the English level, language ability or knowledge. They need to be able to do other things as well. And these are just a few key things that I've picked out. They're not all of them, but there are a few key things that we've seen in our research with test takers, but these are the things that might affect them the most. So obviously, even though that we've mentioned that the tasks, the test layout, what to do in the test is very important. Sometimes as teachers in test prep, we do have a tendency to do the same old, same old. What I mean by same old is a little bit of drilling, task types, make sure you know it, practice it, practice it, practice it, which is important, but it's not the only thing, right? Combining your 4 skills, students quite often think in their minds about the skills in English as separate entities, when actually they do need to think about how they're integrated and how to build those skills as entire things together. Timekeeping, which everybody's mentioned, you need to be able to know how long to spend on a writing task so that you can finish the rest of the test, right? Applying experience. If these 4 skills assessments are often having people use their English in a real world situation, students need to be able to know that they need to apply some experience in their own lives, in their own language, to that test in English as well. Computer-based testing raises more challenges. This is something very specific, but very, very important. If you have to go to a test centre to take your assessment, there's other factors there that will make you nervous, stressed, all of those things that you mentioned, right? The test environment is quite different to working on your test prep in a classroom or at home. And the test itself goes beyond comprehension, especially as you go up in the levels. Literacy skills are tested quite a lot more, and that goes beyond just your English knowledge. So what other skills do students need in order to be successful? They need 21st century learning skills, which are things that they will need for life as well, but these things are really, really essential to doing well in a 4 skills test. So you have things like critical thinking, creative thinking, communicating skills, and collaborating skills. Most high-level assessments that are 4 skills based will include all or most of these things throughout their task types. And students will be having to apply all of these skills or different ones of them at different times in different parts of the test. So that's a little bit about some of the challenges that students face and the things that they need as a base in order to do well at the test. What happens if we add digital or remote teaching and learning to the mix as well? This really starts to complicate things, right? Let's have a look at this. So obviously, in recent times, things have changed a lot. Some of you, as I can see from your comments at the beginning, already work online or may have already worked online before 2020. But obviously, a lot more of us now are doing teaching and learning online. We're interacting with our students online, and that's something that may be quite new for some of us. I mentioned remote teaching instead of online teaching. I read a very interesting article yesterday which talked about online teaching being something that people have been doing for a long time and has been set up in a certain way in terms of online courses and things that are designed for that. And then there's remote teaching, which a lot of us have been doing this year, which has been a kind of emergency quick situation. And that requires a whole different set of skills because maybe our course wasn't planned that way, our students aren't ready for it, and maybe we're not completely ready for it either. So that's what that means. What else is different nowadays, and particularly in terms of test prep? Some teachers might have multiple scenarios to manage or plan for. I noticed at the beginning when I asked you where you teach, a lot of you were saying different things instead of just saying one place, online or classroom. Quite a few of you mentioned quite a few of those situations. So teachers might have to deal with different ways of teaching at the same time. Learners might need to have a fully digital approach or a blended approach, depending on their situation at the moment. So teaching really, really has to be super flexible. And maybe we need a different approach to the 4 skills that we're used to, right? So perhaps speaking has always been something quite easy to manage in the classroom. But obviously doing that online or through a Zoom class is quite a different scenario. So let's look for a minute at teaching test prep and teaching other kinds of English development or English language courses. What could be some of the similarities between teaching test prep and some of those other courses? So obviously, whenever you're teaching English, individual needs and the goals of the student are really important, right? That should be at the heart of what we're doing, what they want to achieve at the end. The problem comes is that, you know, at the moment, if we're teaching test prep online or we're teaching general English online, teachers can't often teach students individually, or it's hard to find that face-to-face, one-on-one time. Some students might be more used to or comfortable with online instruction, and that goes for the teachers as well, right? We all have technological problems. I've been on these webinars and sometimes had problems myself. So it's difficult, and there'll be varying degrees of capability, right? Goal-oriented instruction and learning is essential. That's the same in any English language classroom. Careful planning is needed for large classes. And teachers really need to work a little bit harder to find effective ways to assess progress and look at how our students are learning. So what are some of the differences between teaching test prep online and general English online? There are some specific differences. So in terms of online classes and digital tools, of course, technical problems can affect teaching. Test-specific knowledge. It's not only are you dealing with test prep online with the teaching of the actual English and the grammar and the vocabulary and all of that, you also have the real specifics around the tests that your students are working for. So you have those strategies, you have those really task-specific things that you need to get across to your students, which can take a bit more time and detail and can sometimes be a little bit easier to do in the classroom. The strategies as well, that's another part that can be easier to do in the classroom. And as I've mentioned, the effective feedback and assessment, we need to think about how we're going to do this online because it does need a little bit of a different structure. So, how do we go about providing our students with the test prep that they need? Flipping instruction and learning. So what do we mean by this? So in a traditional classroom, possibly, we've thought always about having most of the teaching done in the classroom, having most of the groundwork done in the classroom, the initial practice, the consolidation, and then students go home with their homework, practice on their own, get some time to work with it, make some mistakes, learn, come back, and you review, and if needs be, you go over it again. With digital learning, that's not necessarily the best way to work, right? And it's not the most engaging way for students to be learning through a screen either. So maybe we need to flip the way we're thinking and sort of change our mindset a little bit. So what does this mean? If we're flipping the way that we think about it in terms of traditionally the way we teach in the classroom, we need to look at these two things. Number one, offline learning and consolidation activities. This means having the students learn through self-study, the detailed work, the granular work, you have them do some of that on their own. The online practice and purpose, this is where you really, for 4 skills, have them do the collaboration, the interaction, where you really work on the feedback and the assessment. That's the best place to use the online sessions and the online interaction for. So what do I mean by this? Here's a few examples. So when I say offline, they can be using the internet, or they can be doing something digital. What I mean by offline is not in a class, so not in a webinar, or not in a call, or not in a Zoom class or something like that. And that's where they should be doing these tasks that are mostly self-study, focused on these 3 things: test and section structure. So whether it's general or specific, guidance, tips, the nitty-gritty, reading through, working through things, and having some support tasks that help them understand. They need to learn to work on their own skill development, obviously guided by you, but they need to have some motivation to start taking responsibility for their own skill development a little bit more. And initial practice and consolidation of knowledge has to be done a little bit more on their own as well. Online, so again, this is now where I'm talking about in a Zoom class or something where you're interacting with the students. This is where they review the knowledge that they've done on their own, seal it, ask questions. I didn't quite understand. Can you explain? Give me more examples, whatever it is. This is where you support them. So you help them with those enabling skills, give them feedback on where they're doing, how they can do better, really support them. Productive skill practice, like we've said, this is where they share and practice their writing, their speaking, really get some interaction going. And of course, this is where you're supporting them, answering queries, giving feedback and assessing. Some good questions coming up in the chat. I'm getting distracted, but we'll come to those at the end. So what do we need to think about when we're thinking about this offline, online situation? So we need to think about the materials students can explore on their own, because they won't be able to do everything. We can't expect them to understand everything on their own. Some things do need explaining. But what things can they do on their own, and what things should be taught? We need to make sure the materials that we have are flexible enough for us to use them and apply them in the way that we want to, online, offline, and for different purposes. We need to be aware that the teaching of this test prep might take a little bit longer than it usually does, and that we might need to take a different path of doing it than we would normally in a classroom environment. We need to make sure our practice of the 4 skills is really balanced, and that the evaluation is constant, and the knowledge of the test prep is there as well. And again, make sure the materials fit your students and yours blended needs. They need to have enough leeway for you to use them at home or for you to use them online. So I'd like to take an example now to show you a little bit more what I'm talking about and really go into this 4 skills side of things. So I'm going to use a Pearson test, which is PTE General, also known as Pearson English International Certificate. And I'm going to show you some courseware that will hopefully illustrate some of these things that I'm saying. So Practice Test Plus for PTE General is a 4-level courseware that was released this year in 2020. So it's brand new content. As I said, it has 4 levels, so it covers A1, B1, B2, and C1. And this is not a traditional courseware in the sense that it's lesson plans or it's kind of guided in that way. It's a very, very flexible material, and that's why I want to include it today as an example. So a quick overview for anybody who doesn't know the PTE General test. This is a 4 skills test from Pearson that is globally recognised by schools, universities and government bodies all over the world. It's a test that measures the real world skills in English across 6 levels. Our courseware only covers 4 of the levels, but there are 6 levels in the test. And it really, really is a test where it has students use those 21st century skills that we were talking about earlier. The task types in the test require students to demonstrate their level of English, their ability in English, and also in real life situations. And it gives them world skills in scenario-based situations. The test is currently a paper-based test, so it's a test that you take on paper. But there's a computer-based test coming in 2021, and that will be a very flexible test. It will be a shorter test. It will be a very different test experience. So I know in the chat some of you have been asking about the differences between paper-based and computer-based tests. There is a difference. Some of the task types quite often are quite different, but also then you have that test environment part and the managing of the test on a computer, which is quite different to preparing for a paper-based test. So more coming on that in 2021, but that's the basic overview of PTE General. So Practice Test Plus for PTE General. It's designed specifically to be flexible. It's designed to be a product that can be used by anybody in any way that they want in order to prepare for this test. So as I mentioned, it's not a set course per se, as in it's not dictated to the teacher or outlined how much time it should take, number of hours a week, suggested lesson plans, anything like that. It's really quite flexible and open for the students to use as they wish. It's user guided. That means that it can be guided by the teacher and the teacher outlines how it's used, or it can even be a self-study courseware that a student just uses on their own in order to prepare for the test. There's no one typical kind of user. The content in the courseware is very authentic, so it mirrors what you would find in the real live test, which means that it has a wide variety of content, of themes, of topics, and things that anybody in real life would find interesting. So it's not directed at one particular age group or one particular kind of person. It's flexible content, as I've said. It can be taken alongside other general English schools courses or preparation courses as a supplement. So you've got your general English language development maybe, and then you could bolt this on as a separate thing for the test. It's divided into sections, which has lots of really detailed guidance and tips and all those strategies that we were talking about that students need, lots of that in there. It's ideal for different purposes, so you can use it in a digital, blended or face-to-face print scenario, and it can be really easily adapted for any of those situations. So this is what we have, and this is why I'm saying it's very adaptable. With every version that you buy, so you can buy a teacher version or your student version, you get your ebook or your print book. Next year we will have it available so that you can get both together, which is quite exciting. So these are all the things that you have in your book. You get your digital resources, which are on the Pearson English platform, and you get a practice app as well. So there's lots of different things that you can be using there in different ways, and I'm going to show you now just how we can do that. So let's have a look at a book. Just going to share my screen. Right, I hope everybody can see my screen. Charlie shouts if you can't. So this is level 3 of the courseware, and this is B2 level, and this is the teacher version of the book. So as I've said, this is very flexible. You have 5 complete tests within this piece of courseware. Tests 1 and 2 are specifically for guiding the student, and this is where that really meaty guidance, strategies, loads of tips, loads of things around all of those 21st century skills and how to do them. That comes in test 1 and test 2. Tests 3 to 5 are complete practice tests. So what I'd like to do is just very quickly go through and show you a couple of examples of this online offline idea. So here at the beginning you have a nice introduction that shows you all of the things that you get with the book. You get an overview of each section. So you start with listening here. You have an overview about all the sections in the test. And this is really just gives the student and the teacher as well, if you're not familiar with the test, a really nice overview of how it's laid out, what to expect, what do you get, what do you need to do. In test 1, each part of the test has been specifically designed to have 2 sections, a how-to section and a training section. And this is really where that meaty guidance comes in. This section is somewhere where I would suggest that students, you could direct students with certain activities to use this as an offline learning, not being taught in the classroom kind of activity. So in the how-to section, it gives you really detailed information on the skills that you need to apply to that task type. It gives you lots of ideas and tips on how to develop the skills that you need, and that includes the 21st century skills that we've mentioned. And then when they've worked through this, and you can give them lots of activities to work with this, apart from just reading it, lots of things that you could do there. Once they've worked on that, you have in section 1, you have training for each part of the test. So this gives you lots of practice activities around this task type, and these are all focused on the first activity of that type. So test 1, you have your how-to, tells you the strategies, your training, it gives you lots of in-depth kind of deconstructing the tasks so that you can find out how it works and how you can do it. And that's all focused on the first activity in test 1. So this goes all the way through. I'm not going to show you all of it because it could take us quite a while. I'm going to jump to test 2. So test 2 is a little bit different. This is test 2 with guidance, and this is another offline place where students can really do this work on their own. Once you've done some more consolidation in the classroom, looked at what they've learned, you can have them work on test 2. Test 2 has something called tip strips, and these are kind of hints that give students clues about each activity. So you have section 1, your activity here, and you have for each part of the question hints or tips that make students think about the activity and about the question and why it might be the right or the wrong answer, or what the right or wrong answer might be. These are kind of slimmed down versions of the guidance that comes in test 1. So it's like a step forward from what they've done in test 1 to test 2. And that goes all the way through test 2. Then you get to test 3 to 5, which are clean tests. These don't have any tips, any guidance anymore. They're just practice activities. So obviously these are more your kind of ready activities where your students feel more confident, feel like they can do more with the content and just practice, practice, practice and do it for themselves. You can have them either do this together in class, do this at home. This works on an offline, in an online, in a classroom, in a digital environment. There's lots and lots of ways that you can use this in a different way. So it's very, very flexible. I'd just like to show you another little part of the book which is really useful for students. So at the back of each book you have what is called a grammar bank, and this is just there, this is level specific. So this book is B2. Here in the grammar bank you have lots and lots of reference and practice activities for level appropriate grammar for B2. So if your students need to refresh, they can go here. If you want to teach a particular point that you think your students in general are weak at, you can go here and use it as an activity in class. Lots and lots of useful stuff here. At the back of the book as well, we have all our speaking visuals. So these go with the activities in the book. So you can see your role play cards, your photographs and things that you need for your speaking part of the test. And then we have something really juicy, which is really exciting, the speaking bank and writing bank, which come with every level. And this is, again, something that can be used offline or online, digitally, face-to-face, however you want to use it. So for each task type in the test, you get, again, the skills and the things that you will be asked to do in the test. You get an example question. You get exam tips. You get this really meaty, useful language list, which helps students learn specific phrases and language that can help them to perform in those real life situations or functions. And then lots of practice as well, and analysis of the task type as they go through. So it's really, really useful, and I think you'll be able to see quite easily how this can be used at home or in the classroom. Same thing for writing. You get a sample writing activity, exam help, your useful language, and lots of really juicy things here. So you have your practice, how to plan an answer, something that students find really difficult sometimes. Again, 21st century skill there. And a checklist. After they've done an answer, go back and have a look at the checklist. This is really useful for having you evaluate their progress. So don't worry if you didn't get to catch all of this. In your goodie bag, you will be receiving some of these pages so that you can go through and have a look yourself at this. So online and offline skills focus. Let's have a look at this in a little bit more detail. And what do we mean? I'd like to focus on speaking first. If we get to some of the other skills, that would be good. But speaking is quite an interesting one to work with. So as part of the things that come with the components of Practice Test Plus for PTE General, there are speaking test videos. These are videos that were specifically filmed for this courseware. They were filmed in Poland with some real PTE General students. So that's really exciting. And they're basically videos of the students taking each part of the speaking test with an examiner. The students aren't perfect. They have, you know, normal places where they could improve or whatever, but they're real students doing the test. Generally good examples, but with some areas for improvement. So each of these videos, there's a video for each section of the test for each level. And then to accompany each video, there's an expert video as well. So we have an expert in PTE General who talks about the section of the test. What can you find? What skills are needed to do well? All that kind of thing. And they talk about the student video as well. So they talk about where the student did well, where they could improve, giving examples of what they could do better or where they did really well as well. So they're really useful and really meaty. And again, this is something that can be used for part study at home. Works really well for an online or a Zoom class, so you can show parts of it and have the students work on it, create your own questions around it. Lots and lots of really interesting ways. I mean, literally, you could do a million different things with this. So we're going to watch a video. It's a short video. This is from the C1 level. And this is a student answering the questions in section 11 of the test.
Now, Kevin, we're going to discuss something together. The question is it better to work as part of a team or individually? What do you think?
I think that being part of a team is the best way to overcome many problems because of different array of skills that different people have. Of course, they come from different backgrounds, which means that they have experienced different things and can manage different problems in a different way.
They can bring in different skills, but some people can be difficult to work with.
Absolutely, but there are different roles in a team.
Mm-hmm.
I think that if we have a good manager or someone that manages the team well, mm-hmm. they can keep everyone to their promises. Having to work under a bigger amount of stress or different situations is very motivating for some people, and they can take different roles in the team and help.
Okay. Don't you think that working independently forces you to push yourself further?
I don't think so. I think there is a lot to learn from working in a team.
How about a greater sense of achievement from working individually?
Well, if you work individually, of course, you're going to have a bigger sense of achievement. But a team can achieve so much more, which means even though the sense of achievement is a little bit less, as a whole thing, you can feel better.
So would you describe yourself as a team player?
Absolutely, yes. I love to work with a team. I love to see how different people react and help to achieve their goals.
Thank you very much.
One of the many videos that come with courseware, and he was a great student. He was C1 level. I think it's a really motivating kind of video because students can actually see other students doing it, and it's a really nice way for them to look at it. So just very quickly before we finish, this is a sample pathway that I've put together for how you might want to incorporate this video into some of the other materials that we have in the book and with things that come online that students can have as well. So I haven't had time to mention it, but there's a lot of PDF resources that students can download, lots of things about improving their skills, lots of other things for them to work with, worksheets, things like that. So this just gives you an idea of how you might assign things in the book or work with them in a digital or face-to-face classroom here, and then things that you might have students do at home. So let you look at that for a second. And then also some ideas for online practice, different things that you can have them do to practice each section of the test. So I think you'll agree that it's really flexible. It really can be used in any way. And this is the point of showing you this, is to show you that the material that you use for test prep when you're doing these kinds of combined teaching, blended teaching, whatever it is that you're having to face and use, make sure that it's something that is this adaptable, something that really you can pick bits out of, put them together, bolt them on so that they make the classroom part and the home study part really effective and the best way that you can have your students prepare. I do have some other ideas here today in the presentation, but we won't have time to get to them. But I'll just click through them now so that they are in the video. And then when you receive the video at the end with your goodie bag, you'll be able to go back and look at some of these if you want to. So I hope that was useful for you today. We've got a couple of minutes left. So Charlie, do we have any questions?
Hello, Joe. Yeah, we certainly do have some questions. Can you hear me okay? Oops. Aha, okay. There's a problem with my audio, I think. I'm going to ping them over to you in the chat box, I think.
Okay.
You can hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Sure. Sorry, no, I thought you couldn't hear me. Okay, so yeah, the first one that came in, looking for a bit of inspiration here. Could you please provide beginner teachers with a piece of advice about testing? As a beginner teacher, what advice would you love to have received on your first week, your first term, or your first year?
Only one piece of advice. Yeah, I guess we'll learn a lot when we're starting, right? I would say taking step by step and don't try to do everything at once. You might overload your students in the beginning because you're really eager to teach them. Get to know them and take it step by step. That's what I would say.
Brilliant. And another tip here, but looking at student motivation. My students are mostly lacking in speaking English in class. Up until now, I feel so drained. How can you make them speak up in English in class? Could you give any tips with motivating my students?
Yeah, I think probably when you have students that are nervous around speaking, making them feel like they're speaking in a very kind of maybe fake kind of forced kind of situation doesn't really help. So it really does matter to have those topics that they're interested in, have them be involved in creating the activities works really well as well. So if you can have them brainstorm the topics, kind of form the activity together as a class, have them contribute to it, and then have them do it, that tends to work quite well because they feel more comfortable, A, with what they're talking about because it's something they're interested in, and B, it just becomes a bit more natural because they've contributed to it. So that's a technique that I've used a lot, and it really does help with those students who don't feel confident enough in front of each other. And also pair people up correctly, right? So that they're not always with the best speaker, maybe.
Brilliant, thanks for that. That's a great tip. I had another one here, which I think you caught in the chat. So let's get this one out of the way with. What do you think about a face-to-face and online test at the same time?
Yeah, so there are. I guess this is about tests that combine the two. So there are 4 skills tests out there where you take a speaking test and an online test as well, or a speaking test as an interview and a paper-based test. There's lots of different combinations. They're very different skill sets, so I think they're both valid. They both test different English skills and life skills in English, which are just as valid as each other. And I would never say that a paper-based test is better than computer, or a computer is better than anything like that. They're all very valid and they test different things. If you're having a situation where they're taking both tests, it's probably an ideal situation because they're covering all of the possible skills they could be tested on, to be honest. But again, it is a very different skill set for each one, so you need to make sure that the prep is very specific, because it's not the same taking computer-based test as it is on paper or a live interview.
Brilliant, thank you. And then a follow-up to that is, how are the PTE General tests marked?
So I'm not an expert in this, but the PTE General tests are marked by examiners who are experts in the test, experts in 4 skills communication and testing and assessment, very experienced, and have been trained for many years to do this, and they're from all over the world. So there's absolutely no bias involved. They're literally just testing somebody's English as it is. The computer-based test is obviously something that's technologically created, and those it's a very long thing. I won't go into it. Probably need someone else to explain it to you very technologically, but basically the test is trained by people who have marked actual answers from real students, and that's how the computer is trained to recognize answers in the test. Brilliant.
Well, I will try and dig up a link to a previous webinar on AI testing and PTE marking.
Yeah, that'd be really helpful, I think.
Fantastic. We had someone asking, can we download the examples? I'm not quite sure which slides this was in reference to, but where can people download these materials? How do they get access to some of the resources that you've shared today?
I'm pretty sure if they go to the Practice Test Plus PTE General page on English.com, I don't know if you'd have that link, Charles. There's I think Anya can confirm there's a link there where they can get samples.
Brilliant. Okay.
We'll try to include some in the goodie bag as well.
Great, of course. That sounds good. I haven't caught any other questions actually coming now. Let me quickly check the chat box if there's anything. But no, I think we've actually covered them all. So thank you very much, Jo. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your time.
Brilliant. And thank you to everyone for taking the time out of your day to attend this webinar. Thanks for your engagement and for your questions. We will be sending out certificates and a recording will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. Please, we do hope to see you at another Pearson English webinar soon. Thanks very much and have a good day.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.